You haven't heard about the McCrispy yet? Well, then, you probably haven't heard the sweet silence after the first crispy bite either. Go try it for yourself to hear the best nut sound you've ever heard.
Myrtle Avenue and Flatbush Extension.
I don't know much about my next guest, but if you listen to his newest album, City for Sale, you would agree with me that he's super talented and created a great album. If you then dig deeper into his body of work, you will say, again, this guy is super talented and creates great albums. He's Von P, and I want to welcome him to the library with Tim Einenkel. Thank you for joining me, man.
Thank you for having me.
Bust a Mercedes-Benz. Let's show them what we've been knowing. They wonder what it is. Stop with thinking that.
So, obviously I want to talk about City for Sale, but let's start with Tanya Morgan, the other guys, and how the differences and similarities of Von P, the solo artist, producer, and Von P as part of Tanya Morgan and part of the other guys. Well, what are the differences? What are the similarities? And also talk about those two groups.
Yeah, for TM, it's been, we started out, it was myself, Don Will, it's still the two of us, but we also had Ilias, who's the third MC in the group, and we had kind of like our in-house producer, Brick Beats. They're all from Cincinnati, Ohio. I was the only one from Brooklyn. And we started out, we have like albums and EPs and mixtapes, but the main projects we have, Moonlighting was our first album, that was 2006, and we have Brooklynati. And after that, well, me and Brick, we always did the production, but then we started to branch out once Ilias was no longer part of the group. And, we're all still people to this day. Like, we did a crew album, a legendary album, and Ilias is a part of that. So we're all still a part of the same collective. But once he left the group, we started to just branch out with our production and try to find a new sound as a duo with just myself and Don. So it's been just a journey of Tanya Morgan is more about, it's funny, as far as I go, Tanya Morgan is more about like the production and like a lighthearted, being about serious everyday topics, and just like we deal with like we talk about mental health a lot. Like if you listen to Don's album, we talk about mental health a lot. We talk about just being fly MCs at the same coin. So it's like being down on yourself, but at the same time knowing you're the flyest. And I think that's a theme that carries out a lot on our albums. I was jokingly telling Don, I was like, Tanya Morgan is like BoJack Horseman, because it'll be about mental health, but then we're also silly, but then we also drink a lot. It's
nice.
like we got this thing that it's hard to fully put a finger on it, but when I try to put a finger on it, that's what it is to me. And with the other guys, that's Joe and Isaiah on the production side, and I show up and I write rhymes. I don't have to worry about the production. I still help out with the sequencing of the albums and putting the albums all together, because that's one of my favorite things to do. Even when I didn't do any of the beats, I still liked that side of production.
Awesome.
But with the other guys, I show up and I get the beats and I rap, and I don't have to worry about the beats at all, and I just get to put on whatever, not a costume, because that sounds like being, like I'm not being myself, but I just get to be the rapper I want to be that day with the other guys' project, and I try to make those sound different from what Tanya Morgan is, or even what I do on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So it's most like, if you listen to the Fiasco, that was me saying, okay, I want to make, if I had to attempt to make a New York album, because I make a New York album by default. So
right.
If I had to attempt to make a New York album, what would that sound like? Just thinking that it would make me do something different. And I think that's what the Fiasco was. And that's what I do with the other guys. And then we put out the EP, Good Love and Joy. And that was, okay, how fast can I make a project that I stand behind? Not just like throwing songs together, but can I make a song really quick and live with it and be like, okay, yeah, I like this song. And that's what we did for the EP. And for the next, we're going to do another album, myself and the other guys, and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do for that one. But it's that's just like, you know, trying to step away from what I do, but while still being who I am.
Right.
With the other guys, yeah.
Let's turn to your album, City for Sale. It's the first album you've produced entirely on your own, and you said about the album, City for Sale is a breakup album, a relationship album. Instead of a woman, it's about my hometown, your hometown, your own way of living. Why decide to create this album now? Like, what are you seeing that kind of like, all right, I need to speak on this?
Yeah, you know, like I was saying, I lived in Brooklyn, New York, my whole life. That Brooklyn, and actually that like in Sumner Projects in Brooklyn, that's the only place I've lived. I've never lived in another address in New York, period. So when I first moved, well, actually, I'll say I was on the road a lot too. Like starting from 2005, my group Tanya Morgan, we were always on the road, and even when things began to slow down, I want to say that was maybe 2014. Like we did an album called Rubber Souls in 2013, and after that is when I put out the first Other Guys project, and Don started doing more solo stuff, and we just were like slowing down. That was when I started going out to Paris, and I was working with this producer out there, Guts, and his band. And then eventually in 2015, oh no, I'm sorry, it started 2015. In late 2015, Don started coming out. So all that to say, I started moving around so much, and I moved out to Maryland when I in between being out in Paris, I was also in Maryland with my now wife,
mm-hmm.
and seeing how much DC was changing from when, you know, I didn't grow up going to DC, but when my group, when we first started touring, being from New York, it was always easy to get to, of course, Boston, Philly, DC. These were easy places for us to jump and go do a show. And watching DC change and then moving out there, and then even watching Paris change and seeing the dynamics out there, and every time I would come back to New York, it was something different. And so many places that I knew, that I grew up on, that I had ties to as a kid, were, you know, they were doubling and tripling the rent, trying to get them to, you know, give up their lease and get out of here so they can build, you know, whatever. And I started paying attention to that stuff, and it just became, whenever I would try to talk about, because, you know, rappers, we love talking about where we're from. So whenever I would try to talk about, oh, yeah, I'm from Brooklyn, blah, 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 this is what I would end up writing about. So I had to turn it into a thing, because that's not what this album started as. This album started as more of just like another artistic expression of an album. I wanted to try to produce a record by myself, and that was the theme initially. But every time I would start, like the first song I did was Here Come the Neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that, I wasn't even trying to write about that, but that's what came out. And I don't remember what the second song was, but that set the tone for the album. And then I just started heading in that direction, and the theme came about on its own, just from me trying to talk about New York and its current state, and not wanting to. I never wanted to be like, oh, I'm trying to bring New York back. I'm trying to go back to the '90s, and I know my sound is like super reminiscent of the '90s. That's just because that's where I came of age, so that's what it sounds like. But I never do that on purpose. That's just my sound, and I'm definitely not trying to. I don't want to go back to the '90s or anything like that. But that's my sound, and I wanted to do, okay, well, what is Brooklyn today? Mm-hmm. What is New York today? And for me, gentrification is that's just what it is today, because every time I go back home, I'm just watching things change so much, and people that were there their whole life get you know, priced out.
Right.
So many artists can't afford it anymore, and you know, the poor folks, we got to go somewhere else now. And, so I couldn't help but make an album with that. Like, it's like a cloud over the album.
Right. Something I really liked what you did with the album is that, on a few tracks, you start out with saying the kind of the cross avenues, the cross streets, right?
Yeah.
And I want to ask you these questions because you are a New Yorker, and I think, prior to us having this interview, we talked about how very rare it is to speak to a fellow New Yorker. And so I want you to kind of explain the importance of these cross streets to people. So I want to start with like you said, Here Come the Neighborhood, Myrtle Ave and Flatbush Extension. For people that don't understand or know, what are the importance of those two names for you, two streets?
Okay, because I know there's a few, so I'll try to not ramble too much about each one. But okay, so for the first one, they're all personal. Every cross section I say is personal to me, a personal story that I would have to be asked about. Like, you couldn't just hear it and say, I get what he's talking about. So that one, Fort Greene Projects is right there. And to me, because I grew up on Myrtle Avenue and Sumner Projects, the most glaring piece of example of gentrification is if you remember Fort Greene in early 2000s, 90s, that whole strip from Flatbush Ave Extension up to like Fort Greene Park, it was totally different. It looked more like Harlem than it looks like today. Like it just was like these, like you had like the neighborhood. I mean, it wasn't all good. You had like the liquor store, but you also had like the Chinese restaurants, the laundromats, the five and dime store, and it was just all these like people of color lined up on the street, just chilling, and everybody wasn't up to good. It was some people that was just winos out there or whatever. But that's still what I grew up on, and that was the first strip I saw change so much. And now it's like a health food store and a wine gallery and even like Fort Greene Projects right there, the Ingersoll Projects. A lot of people have been moved out and bought out because they're like, I guess they're gonna tear them down eventually or whatever. Mm-hmm. So and they have those huge high rises right there. And growing up, it was like a car wash, a Chinese restaurant, like a hero shop. What else was right there? I think it was like a car wash across the street from a car wash for some reason, but it was totally different right there. And that was my first real sign of paying attention to what was happening. So that's why I start the album with that, because in my world, that was the start of gentrification for me. Mm-hmm. And another thing, when I was looking up, I don't know the name of that high rise right there, but one day I was looking it up online, and I noticed a lot of the people that were moving in. This is like early 2000s, and they were like, well, if you go this way up the street, it's a bit sketchy, but it's a waiting game. You wait it out. Mm. And I was like, oh, so in other words, like, you're waiting for the people that were always here. Well, not always here, but the people that have, like, made this a neighborhood for the past 40, 50 years or whatever, and, have been victims to, like, drugs coming in and et cetera, so the neighborhood has deteriorated, but they didn't just magically wake up one day and say, let's ruin the neighborhood.
Right.
Like that. So the neighborhood got broken down, and now the people that you see that have gotten broken down due to crack epidemic and no jobs and et cetera, now it's like, okay, let's just wait for them to leave, to die out, get arrested, get priced out, and then we can continue to, like, okay, when the neighborhood really starts and they start putting the wine cellars there and the health food stores and blah, 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 that's what we're waiting on. We're just getting in early.
Right.
And that kind of blew my mind, being younger and naive and not knowing how it works and how it goes. And all of that ties back to that intersection. So that's why I start the album like that. And the next one, what is the next one? You wouldn't happen to have them written down.
Marion between Ralph and Howard on Let's Be F Real.
Oh yeah, that one. I had a girlfriend that lived right there. Like she, for whatever reason, I've always dated women that didn't live in Brooklyn. I wasn't looking for women outside of Brooklyn, but you know, I've always dated these girls that she's from the Bronx or she's from Queens, or there's a lot of people, a lot of women from Queens, but the only girl from Brooklyn that I've dated that lived in Brooklyn, she's actually from Staten Island, so I guess I've never really dated a girl from Brooklyn, but she lived on that street. And the next song is like, you know, the girl song, the love song, and let's be for real, and it's followed by Round the Way Girl. And that song, it's not about her, but I just wanted to name, again, just on an inside joke, I wanted to name the girl from Brooklyn that I dated. And also what I consider part 2 to Let's Be For Real is Round the Way Girl. And part of her story is, you know, having a dad in prison and how it affected her life. And I was writing a song, like the child that I talk about in the song and becoming like his stepfather. Mm-hmm. It all ties back to her, like just being a part of being around her and just seeing like her, like having pictures of her dad and her admiration for her dad and her mom's new husband and how he had to, you know, cope with that and it just was what it was when he sees his stepdaughter and everything that's about her real dad, but that's still in your mind, that's still your wife's ex, no matter right. what. Like, so selfishly, that's still your wife's ex, and that, and you know, part of that is her story, and part of it is also my story, just having friends in jail and being a child of divorce and having the guy come around that wants to be your mom's cool boyfriend, and so that all ties back to her. So that's why I named that street. Oh, dope. That one. Yeah.
The Norm you did Vernon between Lewis and Sumner.
Yeah, that's Sumner Projects. That's where I grew up. Well, actually, that's actually 303, which is a part of Sumner Projects. But that's where like I really came of age. My mom grew up on that street since she was 13 years old, and then she moved right across the street when she got married to Sumner Houses proper, and that's where I grew up. So the last one I say is Sumner Project, and yeah, so that's just like that block getting gentrified. It's like you have for everything that's happening around us. There's so much of my life has been, so much of my coming of age, and you know, my run-ins with police and my run-ins with all things illegal. Just being a young knucklehead. I mean, I never sold drugs or anything myself, but I was around, just by law of averages, my friends and just so many people I were around did that stuff, and them being my friends, I was right there with them. Right. So we get into run-ins, get into trouble, and blah, blah, blah. And it all took place on Vernon between Lewis and Sumner.
I want to ask you guys, there's a lyric you spit in the Norm. It goes, "Mama said go to school, baby, just don't go to jail, baby. Do privileged people say this to their little babies? The new neighbors trying to hurry up and get inside. Now they're Yelp reviewing Kennedy Fried Chicken." Can you kind of talk about these lyrics, but also talk about the importance of people not understanding why, you know, changing the fabric of neighborhoods. Like, you know, you're moving in and not understanding why certain places, like a Kennedy Fried Chicken, and, you know, I think I told you prior to the interview telling you about how people in my neighborhood complain about Mr. Softy's music playing and how that is really kind of what it means to go into a neighborhood that you don't know and try to change everything about it without understanding why these kind of pieces of the puzzle, pieces of the neighborhood are important.
Yeah, you know, like maybe it sounds funny to a person that wouldn't know, but that's a cultural thing for me. That's like the Mr. Softy truck at, you know, 11 o'clock at night. Yeah, it's annoying, but that's just what it is, you know.
Right.
That's like, hey, you hear the sirens all the time, and you can't say, hey, or maybe people can complain about the sirens, but it's like, hey, turn your siren down. It's like, no, that's just a part of New York. You hear the fire trucks going all night, the police going all night. You're gonna hear people blasting Biggie, at least in Brooklyn, like to this day, you're gonna hear people blasting Biggie all night. And close your window.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's just a part of what it is to live in a city. So when I hear that, the ice cream man he's letting kids know, hey, come outside. I know it's 11 o'clock, but you're in the house playing video games anyway. It's the summertime. You're not asleep. So ask your mom for $2 or $5, whatever it would cost now with inflation, and come outside and get some ice cream, get a bomb pop or whatever. And it's like, all right, well, tell your older brother, older sister, take them downstairs and get them some ice cream at 10:30 at night. And kids are still outside at that time in the summer too, so it's crazy to complain about something like that. And just like when people complained about Spike Lee's dad playing jazz, and I was like, dude, that's crazy to me. Like
right.
He's from there, and he's playing jazz. It's not he's playing like EDM 3 a.m. or something. He's in there playing a saxophone or something, and that's a part of what being in a city is. It's not just New York, but if you live in a city, you buy into that. You can go live in the suburbs somewhere, but you're in the city. You live by the train. You're gonna hear the train rattling all night. These are things that you signed up for, but you think that because you're paying for the price you're paying, you shouldn't have to deal with that. But no, that you're paying the price to live here, to be a part of the culture, and that's a part of the culture. And I think more than, like, yeah, it's mostly people of color, but for me, more than that, it's like, don't come to this place and hate everything about it. Just go back to where you were. Like, just go back. If you were from a quiet town, go live in a quiet part of Queens. Go live in a quiet part of Long Island or something like that. If you want to be in a quiet part and still be in New York, go do that. But you can't move to Harlem and be upset that it's Harlem Week.
Right.
Like that's crazy to me. And the whole thing I was saying about Mama said just go to school is when I was talking to my now wife when I was still recording this album. I remember I was speaking to her. I was out in Paris at the time, and we were on FaceTime just talking and catching up. And that topic had came up about, because she's from Detroit. So, we can also, there's a lot that could be said about Detroit too, and what's happening, it's starting to happen there. And we were saying how, it's all about, they tell us, hey, just try to not get arrested. Try not to get shot. Try not to get, whatever. Just go to school. You don't want to get kicked out of school. And it was never like aspire for this. And it was, our parents doing their best, the best they can do. Right. But it never was like aspire for this. It was, hey, just go to school. Yeah, just survive. Exactly. Just go to school. Just, I went to college. I got my 2-year degree. I didn't finish out for a bachelor's, but I did get my associate's. And I remember, my mom, meaning I would never say anything bad about my mom ever, but meaning the best. She was like, just if you could just go to college for a year, just get some college experience. Don't just go to college for a little while if you can. It was like, and I was really good in school, but I think she was just saying, if you get there and you don't want to be there or you don't like it, or if it's trouble where your teachers don't like you or this and that, just stick it out, just rough it out, instead of, hey, I hope you go and get a master's degree. Right. Just go and try to tough it out. And so many people did have the same story. Just go to school, just stay away from the police, and they're supposed to help you out. They're supposed to be your heroes, and it sounds sounds weird to even say that. That shouldn't sound weird to say. They're supposed to be your heroes, but they tell us, just don't get in trouble. Like, just leave the cops alone, and just don't, just your teacher, just do what your teacher says. And if you get pulled over, just do what they say. And it's so much of just survive. And it's never like trying to thrive and seek out what's more.
Right.
And I always look to hip hop for that, because although people complain about how materialistic hip hop can be, when it does come to at least when I was growing up, because now you have more people talking about being an entrepreneur and blah blah blah. But when I was growing up, it was more, my jewelry is fly and I got on a $300 shirt and that kind of thing. But that was the aspiration at the time, just have the cool jewelry and have the cool clothes. And then eventually they started telling us, hey, open a business, hey, own your masters, hey, blah blah blah. So that's how I grew up, and I'm just trying to tell that story.
On the track Frenzy, you do obviously an ode to Biggie. I got 7 Mac 11s, about 838s, 99s, and then you go Grand Theft Auto. Obviously Biggie line. Can you talk about these lyrics, but also, and you mentioned Biggie before, but kind of what was his influence on? If you were to take a couple questions, what was his influence on you as an artist? But if you were kind of to take a track that he wrote, or even maybe a verse that he wrote, and you could be a fly in the wall watching him do this or spitting it, which verse or track would it be?
I think that this is kind of morbid, but the eeriest one is My Downfall, because I remember the first time I heard that, and he's just rapping about his funeral. Obviously, this was after he was killed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such an eerie beat, that My Downfall track. So if I could have been in the studio for any Biggie record, I could only imagine it had to have been like a weird mood when he was doing that song, because it's such an eerie record.
Mm-hmm.
And him just coming in talking about, I was high when they hit me. And I mean, he was leaving the party. He probably really was high. They probably was smoking at the party. He did get shot. And then I'm at my funeral and I'm leaving my daughter behind and blah, blah, blah. And rapping about it, like he's not rapping about it in a sad way. And I just can't imagine what it was like recording that song. And I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for that one.
$50 half a man, daydreaming, fuck around, get wet like semen, your whole team. Be more
It's alright, I'm in a frenzy. I got 7 Mac 11s, 838s, Grand Theft Auto, cheat code activate.
What was the first Biggie song you remember hearing that kind of floored you?
First one, I remember my brother was he was in the Marines back when that first Biggie album came out, and he came home with Ready to Die on cassette, and I remember listening to it, and it actually didn't hit me at first, because I was more at the time I was more of a Wu-Tang guy and more of a Tribe Called Quest guy. So when I first heard Ready to Die, funny enough, it just sounded like guys I knew around my way. So for that reason, because it was so normal to me, like the drug dealer, stick up kid kind of thing, where Wu-Tang was more of like a fantasy world, and Tribe just had like these amazing beats, and I just wanted to be like them. But Biggie, when I first heard him, it's like, man, he just sounds like one of the dudes up the street. And I was too young to realize that was the quality of it. But that for people that don't live next door to me, he's painting his picture for them. But I remember, I think the song is "Things Done Changed," the first song on that album.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember listening to it, and again, I appreciated this later, but he sucked me in and painted the picture so fast. And me knowing what that, I was young, but again, being around certain older guys that were doing some of those things, I guess I knew part of the picture already, but he painted it. I knew why he was the person he was at that time based on how he painted that picture, and things then changed. And that was the first time going back to it later when I was able to really understand it and appreciate it, which wasn't that much later. Like, I think just within that next year, by the time Who Shot Ya came out, I was officially like a Biggie fan.
Nice.
So, and then I went back and I was like, oh man, this is special. Like, but before we were like all so aware of, like, you know, now an album comes out and we're trying to call it a classic right away. But before, when we were just all just enjoying the music, I was like, nah, this is something. This is something else. This is like a movie or something. And so I think it was Things Done Changed. It was that one.
Vaughn, we talk about, you know, we talked about Brooklyn. We talk about old Brooklyn. The Brooklyn you grew up in, the Brooklyn you're seeing change now. You know, you end the album City for Sale with No Award for First, and obviously the first words we hear from this track is Sumner Projects.
Yeah.
And you mentioned them earlier. Two things. Can you talk about the significance of Sumner Projects to you, how it shaped you, not just as a person, but also as an artist? And then if you put yourself growing up in New Brooklyn, like the Brooklyn today, how do you think you would be different in terms of an artist, or, you know, an artist trying to come out of New Brooklyn versus the artist that you are now?
You know, for all the complaining I do about things that are no longer around, it's on the surface, it's mainly things that I grew up going to Empire Skating Rink, and now that's not there. I grew up on the Albee Square Mall, and now that's not there. And, you know, the same could be said for so many other people from so many other towns. So that's why I wanted, like, when in the piece I wrote about what the album is, I wanted people to know it's about your hometown changing too, and you changing, and we know wherever you're from. If you're from a smaller town and you go back and everything that's different for different reasons, based on, you know, the economy or whatever, that the album is for everybody. But me specifically, growing up in Sumner Projects, being a kid in the 80s and coming of age in the 90s and being a young adult in the 2000s, and, you know, 9/11 and the blackout, and I believe that was 2002. And all these things, it was like we had all these ups and downs, and and I talk about it on Tanya Morgan's working on a new album, and I talk about the neighborhood again, but in the light of the community, because I feel like I don't really cover what the community is on my album, but I talk about that a little bit more on the new Tanya Morgan one, and how, you know, we would get together for the cookouts, and it wouldn't be fights or shooting or blah blah blah. It would end when they would say, okay, you know, the police come open up the street, and, you know, the permit or whatever was until 8:00, so now it's time to open things back up. But we would still be out there partying, having a great time all night, and it was community. And then people from other blocks, other neighborhoods, other projects, they would come over, and if they had friends in Sumner, they would come hang out with us. And then when it was Marcy Day, you know, your friends from Tompkins would go check out Marcy Day, and they would be there when it was, you know, wherever. And it was this sense of community. And at the same time, you had those people that were doing whatever they were doing, and you had to deal with that. But that was still somebody's. We still knew that guy's mom, and we would see what his mom went through because he got caught up in illegal activity, and, you know, got picked up by the police, or, you know, a rival drug dealer or whatever, you know, they got caught up and he was killed or whatever, and we would see what that did to his little sister and to his girlfriend and to his mom and to his little brother, and it was still a family-based thing. It was still community where, you know, maybe in previous generations, they would go away to war, and you would see what that did to their family. But for me, it was like, if people fell victim to street life, we would still see what that did to their family. And the bottom line is family. It was family, it was community, and it still is family, it still is community. And it's not all the wire. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not all what you hear in the what you hear in like the, you know, the worst, not worst, but like in the most gangster Jay-Z record or whatever. It's like there's more to it, and that's what it was for me. It's just growing up in my community, and ultimately us not having much in the greater scheme of things, but always having enough and still having those what we consider luxuries, whether it was, you know, fashion luxuries or having the new PlayStation, and, you know, one of your friends had it, so everybody goes to that friend's house and somebody else will buy a video game and you all play on their PlayStation, or, you know, whatever it was. When you got older and you and your friends chip in and buy like an expensive ass bottle of champagne just to hang out in front of the building and drink it because, you know, Jay-Z was talking about this champagne. So now we're sitting here in front of 303 drinking this Cristal or whatever, but that's just what we're doing and we're having a ball doing it. And, you know, just things like that. And that's how I grew up. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of, you know, it was pain and everything else, but I always want to bring forth that it was community and family and friendships at the same time, just like any other area.
All right. A last question for you. You know, what when people go out to cop City for Sale, what do you want their kind of biggest, I guess, takeaway to be after listening to the album?
I really want them to find themselves in it. For people, it's like, you know, as far as New Yorkers go, I hope New Yorkers hear it, and, you know, I mean, native New Yorkers, I hope they hear it, whether they're still in New York or they move to Ohio or move south like I did or wherever. I hope they hear City for Sale and hear themselves in it. I hope people that move to New York, they can still relate to it because, you know, the album is not anti everybody that moved to New York. It's anti the system of gentrification and what it does to the people of, you know, the lesser class financially, not socially, but, you know, lesser financial class.
Right.
And what it does to them and what it does to the artists and creatives and the culture that New York, and the reason New York is cool in the first place. And I hope they can hear that and understand it on the album. And wherever you're from, if you're from LA and people move there and complain about it, I hope you hear yourself in it. If you're from Brixton out in London and, you know, they're trying to change Brixton up and you hear that, you hear my album and can hear yourself in it. If you're from down here in Durham, and I just hope everybody can hear their self in the album. If you're around my age, if you're younger, if you're older, if you're from New York, if you're not from New York, if you know what it's like to grow up and have just enough and then see your neighborhood, you can't afford your neighborhood anymore. You can't afford the things around your neighborhood, and things are starting to feel like they're not for you. The album is for you, but it's also like it's a fun album too for anybody that hasn't heard it yet. It's not just, you know, 40 minutes of complaining or whatever. And I think it's a fun record. It's just a real record. It's just my reality and how I grew up and looking forward at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, the album is like, there's no track that I wanted to skip.
Man, thank you.
It's you know, and every track I feel relates to each other and kind of tells that story that, you know, that you're able to tell on the album, which I really appreciated when I was listening to it.
Thank you. I'm big on that. When I first finished it, I sent it to everybody on the album. It was 14 tracks, and at first they were like, "Man, all these songs are dope songs. It don't sound like you should cut anything." But I was like, I want to like make it as concise as I can. So there was another intro, but the Norm covered the intro better than the intro did, so I got rid of that. And the other 2 tracks were there are other songs on the album that cover the 3 songs that got cut.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to like get to the point and not be redundant and say, this song is about this and that song is about that, which leads to this, which leads to that. And at the end of the album, the last song is supposed to sound kind of like that's supposed to be like kind of a reminiscent song. Like, I think to me it has like a bit of an old school bop to it, but it still has like a futuristic bop to it at the same time. So I wanted that to be like past, present, future. And the first song is, we're from Brooklyn, but we're moving into Brooklyn with everybody else. Like, we're from old Brooklyn moving into the new Brooklyn. And it just tells that story. So it's supposed to be like a cycle. If you want to hit play again, you could just start it over. So I'm happy that you say that, man.
That's dope, man. New album is City for Sale. Artist is Von P. I'm truly grateful that I got to not just listen to this album, but then also go back and listen to all your body of work. It's been great listening to your music.
Thank you.
Now a big fan. So thanks, man, for doing this the interview, and thank you for being on The Library with Tim Einenkel.
Sure, I appreciate it, man.
That'll pay me for the starting up. Crowds now applauding us. Let's get the market up. Hardcore gentlemen. Even the gays say I slay like venison and hook me with their women friends. Probably it's a gift. Holler at an auntie, she probably